It was a Monday, April 15th, 1985. The weather was beautiful.
Retired Highway Patrol Lieutenant Alan Hines.
We had our normal morning. I'd worked a wreck. I think he had been out working traffic.
Remembers all too well the day he and then partner Jimmie Linegar decided to run what he calls spot checks south of Branson.
This is where the shooting took place. After a routine traffic stop, the call came over the police radio. The name of the person stopped was wanted on a weapons charge. With that, shots rang out.
Hines and Linegar were taken to Skaggs Memorial Hospital in Branson, where Linegar later died. Nearly immediately, authorities, including the FBI, came to search for the suspect, David Tate.
I heard a short burst from an automatic weapon, followed almost immediately by a longer burst.
I just wanted to get away. That was probably the main thought in my mind. I didn't want to go to prison.
I didn't sense that Jim was shooting back. I couldn't see him, but I didn't know where he was. I didn't know what was going on. Tate was still running away.
Roadblocks have been set up on every road leaving the area. Officers are searching every car in an effort to keep the suspect within a certain area.
From Color 10 News and Ozarks Fox, this is Crime Traveler, a look back on criminal acts in the Ozarks and the news investigations that followed them. I'm Steve Savard. As Hines recalls, he and Linegar were set up at the intersection of Highway 65 and Highway 86.
What we did as a spot check was we simply would go out, usually more in a rural area, where the traffic wasn't real heavy, and we would just stop cars as they came to us and look at their license plates, see if their plates were valid. We'd ask to see their driver's license and look at the car and see if there was any obvious equipment violations. And typically, we'd just write warnings on most of the stuff.
Eventually, Linegar stopped an oncoming van and approached the driver. Hines noticed their conversation was dragging on longer than most. Linegar asked the driver to pull onto the shoulder.
I worked my way back. Jim was sitting in my patrol car using the radio. He was checking the driver. He motioned me over and he said, "This is the driver." He held up the driver's license and it had the name Matthew Mark Samuels on the driver's license, had a picture of the driver, and it had come back that it was a valid Oregon driver's license. But then it came back later, after that, that said, well, there's a possible warrant with someone using Matthew Mark Samuels as an alias, and that it was some type of weapons violation.
Linegar and Hines went back to the van. Linegar to the driver's side, Hines approached the passenger window.
Jim stood just behind the driver's door, which is kind of a strategic thing so somebody can't shove a door open and knock you out into traffic. And I could hear Jim talking, and I heard Jim say, "Is this your van?" And the driver said, "No." And Jim said, "Whose van is it?" And the driver said, "A friend's." Well, there was camping gear, there was, that type of stuff in the van. And in April, in Branson, that's really not that out of the ordinary. So Jim said, "What's your friend's name?" And the driver responded and said, "I don't know him that well, I don't remember his name." And Jim just immediately said, "Step out of the van."
The driver, later identified as David Tate, started to get out of the van, but then shot Linegar 11 times with a hidden automatic gun as he stepped out of the van. For Hines, at this time, it was all about remembering the training he learned from the Missouri State Highway Patrol.
From the instant that I heard the shot, and I've described it this way to, I've talked to police classes and stuff. From the instant that I heard the shot, I went automatically into the training that we'd had. We trained and trained, what to do if somebody shoots at you, how to shoot back, where to shoot. The best way I could describe it was like a videotape in fast forward that somebody slammed the pause button on. Because when I got to the point where I could see Tate still running away, realized how badly Jim was hurt, we had never talked or trained. What do you do? Do you go after the person or do you stay with a wounded officer? And that was where the pause button went on. At that point, that was the first point that I really had to stop and make a decision as to what to do. And I made the decision to stay with Jim.
Hines administered CPR and waited for backup. Tate ran into a nearby wooded area. Linegar was airlifted to Skaggs Hospital, where he would later die.
He was hit 11 times. The vest stopped 9 of them. The others that hit him There were two that were critical, and they both went in basically under his left arm as he turned, he turned to take cover. That's what he was doing too.
It wasn't until a sheriff's deputy arrived that Hines realized he'd been shot 3 times as well.
I was struck in and out at the base of my neck, in and out on my right bicep, and in and out on my right hip. They took care of me, and I was, and I dealt with some survivor's guilt over that. Here, Jim was wearing his vest. I wasn't that day. At that time, they were recommended but not mandatory. And I had looked at the weather, and it said it was going to be 70 to 75, and I thought, it's a Monday, it's a day shift, nothing's going to happen. Well, it did.
Hines spent the next 24 hours in the hospital, sure of 2 things. Linegar would not make it, and Tate was now top priority for the incoming FBI. Color 10 News beat coverage confirmed the FBI's urgency.
Not only because he killed a Missouri state trooper, which makes it extremely high priority, and this is, of course, is not a federal violation in itself, but the fact that he was indicted yesterday and was already being sought prior to that time as a federal fugitive.
It took authorities nearly 6 days to find Tate. He was found in Shadow Rock Park in Forsyth, nearly 20 miles away from where the shooting took place. In a jailhouse interview, Tate says he was not prepared to spend that much time in the woods.
I just kept walking. I figured I'd stay away from population, and I knew there was a highway north. I found out later it was about 100 miles away from me, so there was no way I could really catch it going across state, But I was completely unprepared. The area I'd gotten into was, basically surrounded by everything. I'd, been fasting 5 days, and I got stuck on that hill one morning behind the hotel or whatever it was out there, and it was near a roadblock and everything, and I just got pretty thirsty that day, being famished that long, and I wasn't prepared for that. I hadn't been fasting or anything like that regularly, and I got thirsty. I went down, got a drink, and it's when I went back up. If I'd stayed in the park, I probably wouldn't have had a problem.
Hines says it was a random call to police that led to Tate's arrest.
And of course, everybody, around there knew that we had a manhunt going. There were roadblocks, and somebody called in and said, "Hey, don't know if this is the guy you're looking for, but there's a guy acting really strange down here." And so they sent a car, and he caught. It was Jack McMullen was the officer that caught him.
David Tate has been apprehended and identified. David Tate has been apprehended and identified.
After a summer of court legalities and changes of venues, the trial of David Tate began on November 12, 1985. During the trial, Tate's defense team admitted he killed Linegar, arguing his isolated upbringing may have led to the shooting. Tate was also part of a white supremacist group known as the Order, or the Aryan Nations. Richard Butler, the Aryan Nations leader, says Tate wanted to do something with his life and says that's when Tate left the Nations and moved to the Order.
Well, he is a very fine young man, very idealistic young man, and apparently he felt that he wasn't doing anything, just laying out our publications. I think most young men get to the point that they want to do something, in other words, and this is why he left Aryan Nations to join the Order.
Tate shared his beliefs in the jail interview.
I don't really hate other races, but I do love my own race, and I'm a separatist. I just don't believe in race mixing. It destroys our race and it destroys theirs.
Is your own race superior to the others?
It's the one that's chosen by God, yes, I feel that.
On November 13th, a 12-person jury convicted Tate of first-degree murder in the death of Jimmie Linegar. On January 6, 1986, Tate was sentenced to life without parole. Hines told Ozarks First in 1986 the sentencing was law, and as an officer, he had to abide.
The system that I work for, the judicial system, and the system that Trooper Linegar gave his life for, is what we all believe in. David Tate had a jury trial. The 12 jurors all decided unanimously that he should not be put to death, and that's the law of the state of Missouri, and that's the law that we'll abide.
Hines says the prosecuting attorney at the time told him he needed to prepare for Tate not getting the death penalty.
He said they haven't given the death penalty in Boone County since 1824 or something like that. He said that's just the atmosphere up there, and sure enough, they convicted him, but they gave him life in prison, and that was after the trial, the life in prison. Then we had a second trial, and it was an armed criminal action and first-degree assault on me.
The second trial began on January 28th.
Anyway, we had that trial. They found him guilty on both counts, and the judge at that time was the same judge that had the murder trial, and he went ahead with the sentence of life, but made it not concurrent, but consecutive. So he had 2 life sentences that he has to serve, one after the other, so he'll never get out of prison.
Hines credits therapy and his faith for saving his life and his marriage. Hines remained close friends with Linegar's family and says Jim's son, Michael, became a trooper and covers the same area where his father got shot while wearing his father's badge number. In 2003, that stretch of Highway 65 was named after Jim Linegar.
Is there anything you would want to say to David Tate to this day?
Just that, I'm sorry, your beliefs are so messed up that you think that this was right, that you think that a Missouri State Trooper was somebody that wasn't worth your time, I'm sorry your beliefs are that messed up, because that's just, it's wrong.
Tate told reporters his beliefs were backed up by the Constitution.
I am sincere when I say I'm sorry about it. Then if you look at it overall, how it could have been prevented, you can look at the corruption in our own government. Okay, our original Constitution gave us the right to keep and bear arms. Yet now there's a possible 120 years and $3 million in fines just on the weapons in the van. God's law, nor our original constitutional law, neither of them denied the right to keep and bear arms.
David Tate is still in the Missouri Department of Corrections at the Southeast Correctional Center. Crime Traveler is a Color 10 News and Ozarks Fox podcast. For exclusive video from the Color 10 News Archive related to the story and others, go to ozarksfirst.com/Crime Traveler. Our producer is Chris Six. Our executive producer is Colin Lingo. Our research team is Eric Reedus and Lisa Hamlin. I'm Steve Savard. Thank you for listening.